This idea of being able to understand and deal quickly with unintended consequences, which existed before AI, but it's just like on steroids now or some turbo, that there are unintended consequences. And many of those I'm sure are good and some are not. And to be able to turn those things on and off is a huge capability. What advice would you give to companies that are just starting to implement feature management practices?
Yeah, I'll just pick up first with your last comment around AI. I think it's exactly right. Generative AI projects will generate a lot more code. This whole system is about to be tested severely because the amount of code that's being generated is exponential. The amount of new applications that's going to come to pass is exponential. The amount of new features and new capabilities is exponential, which is why you're going to need all these solid foundations, because it's going to be a real test of your ability to de-risk those releases, your ability to turn things off that aren't working, the ability to test in production, the ability to test in real time and turn things on and off and experiment, as you say. Where do you start on the journey? You really start at the beginning of that maturity idea. You start with the idea that we want to separate deployment from release. We know that we want the ability to control who gets our software and when they get it. And so, firstly, the first notion that we try and encourage customers or companies to engage with is progressively releasing your software. Don't release 100% of your features to 100% of your users without first knowing whether 1% of your users are actually enjoying that experience. At the 1% level, as an example, knowing whether you're creating any performance issues with the latest release. And when you have that certainty, only then should you release to the 5%, to the 10%, to the 100%. So the idea, one of the interesting studies that we conducted showed that of customer-facing software issues or customer-facing issues or customer-facing incidents, 82% of those happen because of self-induced issues by the company in the software change process. So what do I mean by that? When you have a buggy experience as an end user, the most likely reason for that is because the company themselves have released buggy software. And so with the notion of buggy software, our idea is you should never have a situation where 100% of your users are experiencing that. That's just not obeying the laws of progressively rolling out software. And so we think the blast radius of any software issues should be very small if you get your rollout process right and if you have that ability to monitor those releases. So I'd say start there, start with that notion of decoupling deployment from release, then work into targeting experiences to given users. Maybe you want to target by region, maybe you want to target by device type. And then once you have that notion, monitoring those releases to make sure that you're catching things early, not at the 100% level, but a lot earlier. And then once you have that notion, yes, of course, think about experimentation and variation of features and making a culture of experimentation. And then you're really ready to roll with a really robust platform.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many companies I know that would love to have a culture of experimentation, but the risks are too great. And so having a way to de-risk is phenomenal. So I hear you on the cusp here of what's possible. And yet I have to ask, what's next for LaunchDarkly? I'm sure you're continuing to innovate and make changes.
Yeah, let's pick up from the culture of experimentation, as you just mentioned there. Experimentation as an industry has had some false starts. I'd say maybe 5-10 years ago, experimentation used to be the purview of marketers. As you mentioned, the marketing was really where I came from in my prior life. And marketers love to experiment with the front end of websites. They love to experiment, but they did it in a way that was entirely detached and decoupled from the engineering teams. And so our notion of how do you create experimentation as a mainstream culture is that you bring it into the purview and the power of where the feature actually lives. And it's the software engineers, it's the developers who own features. So what if you could bring experiments to software features and let product managers, let marketers, let data scientists in to that purview so that they can all see and construct experiments, but ultimately you had the control over the feature at the software level. And so this is how we believe experimentation is actually going to come mainstream. It's going to be about making this egalitarian, bringing experimentation to the rest of us via the control panel or the control plane of a software engineer, which is the feature. So bringing features and experimentation together, we think is going to light this spark. Why is that relevant? As we talked about, for many of these net new projects, if you're going to be very creative around software, you're going to want to do experiments. And in fact, product managers are going to have more and more disputes amongst each other about which variation wins. Should we do it this way? Should we do it that way? We love those kind of, let's call it thought problems, because we can actually manifest that in the experiment. Yeah, exactly. Data trumps. And in fact, we don't even nowadays need to analyze the data ad infinitum. We can, in the models that we use in, say, the LaunchDarkly platform, quickly tell you which experiment wins in a statistically relevant way, and then push traffic to the winning experiment, the winning variation. So yes, this notion of constant adjustment of software experiences, constant tuning of software experiences in runtime, it's really I think where the industry is going. This ability to target given experiences to given users, figure out if it works, and then push it out quickly to everybody else, I think is definitely what we've arrived at the ability to do now. And as I say, things like AI is just the perfect test case for experimentation.